Hi, welcome to another installment in our visiting lecture series here in the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies at the University of Macau. This is our penultimate meeting for this semester, so our final installment will be 2 weeks from today at this time. Today, we are joined by Dr. Sanja Srećković, who is currently a postdoctoral fellow working at the Ruhr University of Bochum in Germany. Dr. Srećković received her PhD in philosophy at the University of Belgrade in 2019. During her time as a doctoral student, she was also a visiting scholar at York University, my alma mater in Toronto, which is where we first met. It's very nice to see you again after all this time, even though it's in a virtual capacity on this particular occasion. Dr. Srećković works on a number of topics. The sort of big picture is an interest in the relationship between language and thought, and of different sorts of mental representations, some of which maybe have not tended to receive quite so much attention from the perspective of mainstream a prioristic philosophy of mind at the very least. I've heard Dr. Srećković talk about cognition of music, and on this occasion, we'll be hearing about animal minds. The title of Professor Srećković's talk today is Affective Basis of Cognition and Reasoning in Non-Human Animals. So the normal procedure applies here. I'm going to hand things over in just a moment, after which we'll have our Q&A, and then I'll just remind everybody that we will be convening downstairs at the Port Club afterwards for a more informal continuation of the event, although of course our visitor cannot join us, regrettably. So with all of that being said, I would love it if, as usual, we all came together for a moment to welcome our visiting speaker.
Thank you, Ben. And yeah, thanks everyone for coming to hear this talk. So this is a beginning of the project of my Humboldt project for 2 years. So it is in the first stage right now. So some parts might be still in progress, but I will try to present it as best I can to be as convincing as I can, that you can see that which kind of importance I think this receives. So the title is Affective Basis of Cognition and Reasoning in Non-Human Animals. So just a second. Okay. So the aim of this talk is to introduce the concept of affective representations. This is not a concept that is widely used. So I only saw it in one other paper, but it was from a different angle. And in literature on mental representations, it is not discussed. So there are different kinds of mental representations, but affective ones are not mentioned at all as a possibility. And I will try to show in this talk that affective or emotional experiences can have actually a cognitive use, which means that our emotions or feelings are not only something that we just feel, but they can also be used for classification, predictions, inferences, or other typically considered cognitive processes. So as for some background, usually the discussions on cognition and reasoning are termed in very highly intellectualized conceptions, very abstract, and seem to be paradigmatic. So take logic or mathematics as paradigmatic examples. On the other hand, discussions on affective experiences are focused not mostly, but a big part of it is focused on discussing which cognitive preconditions we need for affective experiences. Do we need concepts to be able to feel emotions? Do we need some kind of judgments? And then the debates revolve around these questions. But I actually want to flip the discussion on its head. And so my work is at the intersection of these two lines of research, but I'm shifting the perspective in actually talking about the affective basis of cognition. So not about which cognitive preconditions we need to be able to feel, but actually what do we need to feel in order to be able to think, so to say it in simpler terms. And I will try to show that the characteristic features of our affective experiences can actually, because of these characteristic features, affects or emotions can occupy a shared ground between the so-called lower psychological processes, which are considered to be merely perceptual associations, and higher processes, which is considered to be cognition. So let's start. So as for the background and especially the connection with animal cognition, I will talk about two problems which are significantly connected to each other. So first problem concerns the definitions of reasoning and inference, cognition, and conflicting evidence to these definitions. So thinking, reasoning, and inference were traditionally discussed only in the context of human thought. So adult humans were considered the examples of agents who can think or reason or make inferences. And throughout the history of philosophy and psychology, it was mostly thinking and reasoning were defined through their connection to language. It was considered that animals cannot think because they lack language, and this goes from the Greeks also through Descartes, and also today to Davidson, Dennett, and so on. So human language was considered not only sufficient, but also in some authors, they explicitly write that it is necessary for reasoning, because without the help of language, the contents of our thoughts couldn't be held in mind, or as they say, organized or mentally manipulated in a way that allows for flexibility of thought, and therefore for making like these kinds of inferences that we imagine which is how thinking or inference is conceived to occur in the human mind. And one implicit assumption of many of these views, which is also discussed more recently, is that actually these kinds of linguistic views rely on the assumption that actually we can only reason if our mental representations that are parts of the reasoning are internally structured and systematically interconnected. So they need to be sort of like Lego blocks, which can be separated and then reconnected. So our thoughts need to be composed like from Lego blocks that we can exchange parts and then form another sequence, different sequences based on the previous ones. So, and it was considered that only one sort of structure is sufficient for having these kinds of mental representations. That is the propositional structure. That is the structure that has the subject-predicate form, where subject is the object that is identified, and then the predicate or the attribute is something that is attributed to this subject. So if we say the chair is made of wood, or this phone is black, so the chair and the phone are the subject, and then what we attribute to them is the predicate. And it was for a long time considered that this is the only way that we could have these are the only kinds of thoughts that could participate in inferences and reasoning. And I will argue that this is a very intellectualistic and anthropocentric conception of reasoning. It excludes the possibility of non-human animal reasoning. It also excludes the possibility of infant reasoning. So pre-linguistic children would also not be able then to have any kind of reasoning, because they also lack language in which which could provide the form for these kinds of thoughts. But there is now increasing evidence and large body of evidence in comparative and developmental research that shows that both pre-linguistic children and many species of non-human animals can actually perform some behaviors which seem very similar to something that would be based on reasoning, and it would be non-linguistic reasoning. So causal reasoning, many of these you have probably seen the videos with the crows with those tubes with water, where they put a stone to raise the level of water so that they can pick the reward from tube that when it goes higher, or any kinds of tool uses with which animals need to reach some food that is on top of something or behind something. So they need to use causal reasoning to get to the food. Also transitive reasoning, where A is better than B, B is better than C, and then if they are supposed to choose between A and C, they would choose the right one. So this is a very simple example, but actually animals have been shown to perform transitive inferences with very large sequences, such as even 10 or 14, with 10 or 14 items. And transitive reasoning is generally considered to be a paradigmatic example of logical reasoning. So this piece of evidence is particularly confusing for the traditional conceptions of reasoning, also especially non-verbal reconstructions of logical tasks. So if a reward is placed in one of the two items, but it is not in the first item, then it must be in the second. It's not in the first cup, but then it must be in the second cup. And then, so this kind of disjunctive reasoning by exclusion, if it is not there, then it must be there. Or the famous example of the dog the dog that is on the crossroads, that doesn't need to sniff both sides of the crossroads. It just needs to sniff one side, and when it senses that the other animal didn't run that way, the dog goes directly in the opposite way without checking, without sniffing. Like it seems like they are making this is anecdotal evidence, but there are many experimental versions of this task which test for exactly the same, and it seems that animals are pretty capable of making these kinds of inferences or reasoning. So the reactions to this kind of conflicting evidence, there are many different kinds of reactions, but most dominant are the deflationary accounts. So they try to deflate what actually, so they try to say that it is not really true that the animals are making inferences, or that they reason in these cases, but they're trying to deflate it and to reduce it to some much simpler mechanism. So such as, for example, associations and conditioning, which are known from the 50s, from the Pavlov experiments and so on. And importantly, these deflationary accounts are staying within the traditional view, which they keep the intellectualist conception of what inference and reasoning is, but it is just that the non-human animals are not capable of it. So they keep both of these views, and they just try to explain all the complex behaviors by reducing them to some kind of associative mechanisms. And the problem with these attempts is that they are just not satisfying. They cannot predict the results. They are not good in explaining many details of the evidence that we have. And so neither this intellectualistic propositional view with linguistic or language-like mental representations, it doesn't fit with the evidence from animal research, because they probably don't use some kind of language-like representations. And also these deflationary accounts, which are based on associations, are also not satisfying because they just don't fit with the results. So it seems that we have a need for something different, some different theoretical constructs, or maybe for something additional to add to this theory. So maybe the mainstream theories don't need to be completely replaced, but maybe we can just broaden them and add some more options in how it is possible to reason or to make inferences. And this is actually what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying just to broaden the traditional definition by adding more possibilities of how we can also reason, and how reasoning can be applicable to agents who don't use language and who are not necessarily just conditioned like association machines, which they're often considered to be. And this is also connected to the second problem, which I will now turn to. So this is the crisis of the associative and cognitive dichotomy. So the first problem was located in the area of philosophy of mind, epistemology, and the second problem is more pertains to psychology, especially comparative psychology. So they come from different areas of research, but they seem to be very tightly connected. So As for the associative and cognitive distinction, there have been many debates about the observed behaviors of animals. So, as I said, the causal reasoning, transitive inference, also mind reading, being able to guess other animals' mental states, and then being able to predict that they will think that the food is hidden here, so I will hide it here. So it seems like there is a lot of complexity observed in animal behaviors. So the debates for many years have been framed as a question: is this based on associative mechanisms, or is this based on cognitive mechanisms? And now, one important thing to notice is because so many of these debates are framed as this question, it would be expected that we are very clear about what associative and cognitive means, but actually there is not that much clarity as would be desired and as would be actually expected. So by associative mechanisms, it is meant that there are some kind of simpler link forming mechanisms, so just association of the phenomena or stimuli that were connected together in time and space. So we just form connections, associative connections between them, and there are limited interactions between these phenomena. So we cannot have something that is very complex. And by cognitive mechanisms, it is usually understood that they are more complex, that they allow for more flexibility in thought. So we are not just being conditioned to connect two things that happen together with one another, but we can also make more flexible predictions and conclusions, and also the tendency to use rules, to follow the rules, such as rules of logic or some other rules, which it is not clear how exactly this should work for animals, but these are the main two options that were considered in explaining all of these animal behaviors. And in this standard practice in comparative psychology, there are some key assumptions on which this standard practice relies. One is the assumption that there should be a default preference for associative explanations. Why is that? Because they are simpler and they seem to be ubiquitous, so everywhere in nature, and even in very, very simple organisms such as Aplysia, which is the one in the picture below. It was found that they also seem to have some basic forms of, they can be conditioned to certain connections of stimuli in associative ways. And it seems that so there is this kind of agenda that if we that only if we can't find an associative explanation for the behaviors, then we can turn to cognitive explanations and expect that there might be something more complex to which the animals are as to the underlying mechanisms behind the animal behaviors. And there is also a second key assumption, and that is that associative and cognitive mechanisms are exclusive alternatives. So it can be only one or the other, and we have to see which one of those mechanisms is in the basis of the behaviors. And so the research agenda, which was based on these assumptions in comparative psychology, was to first design very difficult behavioral tasks that the researchers imagined that they cannot be solvable by an associative strategy. They must require some flexible thinking. And then the members of the associationist, the proponents of the associationist view would try to design an associative mechanism which could explain these complex behaviors, and then the cognitivists would move the bar a bit further, and they would design an even more complex task, and then the associationists would design an even more complex associative mechanism, and so back and forth, arguing which of these mechanisms can explain the animal behaviors. But this has led to some further developments. So first of all, the increasingly complex associative models, which are now called the new generation of associative models, are have become so complex in these slight alterations bit by bit. So they have become so complex that they involve constructs such as conjunctive representations, which mean representing two items as appearing together. They also have included sophisticated between stimulus relations, so not only that they appear together, but that there is very complex architecture between underlying the processes by which these stimuli react to each other. And then it turns out that these new associative models have reached such high level of complexity, and they also seem to allow for a high level of flexibility, which have been considered marks of the cognitive. So by usual criteria by which these two kinds of mechanisms have been distinguished, now it is actually very difficult to classify these new kinds of models. Are they associative or are they actually cognitive? And also, not just for this reason, but also for some other reasons, the standard practice has been criticized. So not only for this this dichotomy was criticized, and it was questioned whether it is really a dichotomy or if there is actually some different kind of relation between associative and cognitive mechanisms. The practice was also criticized for being oversimplified and relying on conceptual confusions and leading to actually unproductive discussions, because even if we get the answer, okay, this is definitely cognitive or this is definitely associative, like what do we gain by just trying to reduce all of these behaviors to one of these? It seems that there could be deeper understanding that is not just a fighting between these two streams. Oh, is it associative or is it cognitive? And a question has been raised about these new generation associative models. Are they really deflationary alternatives to cognition, or do they actually implement cognition? Is it actually the case that maybe what we consider to be cognition and what we consider to be something even unique for humans, wherein many authors consider that only humans are capable of cognitive capacities? A new question has been raised that maybe it's just something that emerges from complex associations, and that actually both cognitive and associative explanations can be correct at the same time. They're just pitched at different levels of analysis. So if we look at the level of neurons and neural connections, we can explain things in associative terms, but then if we look at a higher level of explanation, then the cognitive explanation with rules and propositions can be a good explanation on that level. But this is also not so straightforward, because then we need to ask, how does this implementation work? What actually is the higher level then, if we already have associations at the level of neural functioning? And also, how are associations and how is association and cognition actually connected to each other? Because they are framed in completely and substantially different terms. So associative mechanisms are framed as links between nodes, or nodes being the stimuli and links being the associations. And cognitive mechanisms, on the other hand, are framed as rules and propositional representations. So how can they be at the same time correct at different levels of explanation if they are so substantially different from each other, and it doesn't seem like there is a clear way to connect them. And so this is where I turn to the affective representations as something that I think is related to both of these two problems. So just to repeat once again, which were the two problems. So one was the definitions of reasoning, the intellectualistic ones with propositional representations, so the problem is that these traditional definitions are in conflict with the results on animal reasoning. And the second problem is the crisis of the associative and cognitive dichotomy, and crisis of the standard practice in comparative psychology. And so in response to problem one, I argue that we should actually have a non-intellectualistic redefinition or broadening of the concept of reasoning. So we should open the the concept of reasoning to also involve different theoretical constructs which could be suitable for participating in inferences. And I would claim that affective representations are such a theoretical concept. So this is something that non-linguistic creatures can have, and that can also be suitable for being element of reasoning. And there is no need for language or propositional representations in these kinds of, if we rely on these alternative kinds of representation. So we can then actually allow that other creatures can also reason and make inferences, which would be then resolve the conflict with the evidence from animal research. And in response to the problem 2, I would actually not resolve the problem, but I think I would actually add more weight to this crisis of the dichotomy. So I would just add an argument for reconsidering the dichotomy, because I think that the clear-cut dichotomy between associative and cognitive should be rejected, and it should the binary approach of having these two completely different kinds of processes should be replaced by a continuum. And with affective representations, I am actually identifying a cluster of processes that have a leg in different sides of the dichotomy. So I'll show in the rest of the presentation that affective representations, the way I understand them, have something in common both with the associative processes, but also with the cognitive ones, or even the propositional representations. And this should show that we could have processes that have very characteristic features of both of these opposite sides. So that means that maybe even this should further add to the questioning of the dichotomy, that maybe we don't have such different mechanisms. Maybe there is just a continuum of different kinds of mechanisms and not two opposites. Okay, so I will try to provide some support for this view, which is, first I will provide an analysis of affective experiences. In the first part, I'll show how they are connected to associative processing, and then to the associative side, and then in the second part, I will show how they can function as representations by providing a semantic and structural analysis. Then the second line of support should come from showing that they have that there is some explanatory value in introducing affective representations. They can be applied to explain phenomena in animal cognition research. In my previous research, I focused on transitive inference, and here I focus on the. So I'll try. Usually in these presentations and papers, I go one by one. I'm trying to apply them to one case study in particular to show that it works in this particular case study, and then hopefully I can gain evidence for them being applicable to many different kinds of case studies, and then I can have a bigger case at showing that this is really a useful concept to accept in cognitive science and philosophy of mind. So there is a phenomenon that is called emotional bookkeeping, which was observed in primates in the context of reciprocal altruism, which I will explain in more detail in the later part of the presentation. And the third line of support for this view that I'm presenting should come from neuroscientific research, although this is still not conclusive, but it is just a hint that there might be some support, but in the next years we should see if this is really confirmed. So let's go to the. So I said I will go to the first of the connection to the associative processing. So this is where I turn to now. So just to check my time. Okay. I will not dedicate that much time to this part, because it seems that this is not a controversial thing to claim that affective and associative processing are closely connected. It has been known since the 50s, since the Pavlov experiment. So the role of feelings of satisfaction and discomfort were used for associative learning by conditioning in many animals. And this is a well-known effect. And there is also some support from neuroscience that there is a common neural substrate in orbitofrontal cortex of affective and associative processing, which indicates that there is a fundamental relationship between them because they happen to activate the exactly same parts of the brain. And also, even in object recognition phase, which was considered to be the first phase of perception, there has been found that both the contextual associative information, what other features we associate with the object when we observe the object and even before we recognize it, already in this kind of initial information, there is also affective valence. So already when we are recognizing an object that, oh, this is this person that I know, or this is this kind of apple, or something like that, we already have the affective information already in this very initial phase. So contrary to the previous views that affects are something that comes after the fact, after we recognize something, the object or a person, and think about it, and then we have some kind of feeling. This new line of research suggests that we actually compute affective information immediately, even before recognizing the object, and that actually affective information is something that helps in recognizing the object. So because we know that we dislike this person, we recognize them more easily because we have this stored in our memory. And when we just perceive before recognition, we already feel this some kind of negative valence. So I have here made a short case for why affects and associations are connected, but also I want to say that they are not, affective representations are not the same as associations. So how I want to differentiate them, it's very similar to how usually cognition is defined. So I frame them as something, I consider them as something that can store more complex information, unlike association, so that can also store not just only elemental information about some particular object, but also relational information. Something is better than something, or relations between different phenomena or stimuli. Also, that the affective representations differ from associations in that they have different updating dynamics. So unlike associations, which are more based on elementary updating of each particular association, there can be a more integrated representation, which, as I said, stores more complex information, but it is also then updated in more complex ways than mere associations. And now I turn to the other side, showing how affects are also connected to representations and to the kinds of mental representations that are usually considered to be necessary for reasoning, and they're considered to be part of cognition. I need a lot of water for these longer talks. Cognition and reasoning are characterized by flexibility. That is one of the key features by which they're often distinguished from associative conditioning. And this potential for flexibility is often explained just, it is considered that it requires structural features of the representations involved. So as I mentioned before, compositionality is, to go back to the example of Lego blocks. So we need to have some ingredient blocks, which we can then change their places and make new thoughts out of the previously existing thoughts by recombining them and then making new conclusions. So we need to have representations that allow this kind of Lego dynamics, so to say. So in the literature of mental representations, affective states or experiences are not recognized at all. But on another hand, in the part of literature on philosophy and psychology of emotions, affective states are actually described almost universally as in representational terms. So they are considered to have an intentional object, or they're object directed. So for example, they always give this example of a bear. I am afraid of a bear. And then the bear is this object to which my fear is directed. So it is the intentional object. That can be an object or person, or it can be even a situation. I am afraid of the exam. I am afraid of getting into some car accident. It can be also the whole world. The whole world is so threatening. The whole world is beautiful. So we can have different kinds of object. It can be also, it doesn't have to be something external. It can be also something, we can have emotions about our own thoughts, about anything, literally anything to which our feelings are projected on. And there is always in affective experiences an evaluation of the intentional object. So we are not only afraid of the bear because bear is neutral. We also evaluate the bear as dangerous and threatening, and that's why we are afraid of the bear. And this goes for every other intentional object. So every affective experience involves experiencing the intentional object in evaluative terms. So we are always evaluating the object in some affectively specific way. And this is possible because affects have these two characteristics of valence and intensity. So valence means that they are either positive or negative. So this can be cashed out in different ways. It can be pleasant, unpleasant, good or bad, attractive, aversive. So there are many different ways to cash out what is positive, this distinction of positive and negative, but there is always some kind of there is this dichotomy of positive and negative, which is the more general term, and all affective experiences always have some intensity. So they are felt either at a stronger or a lower degree of intensity, but they always have some intensity. And through these features, they can affects enable a valenced evaluation, so positive or negative evaluation at a particular degree of their intentional objects. And as I said, it can be evaluating something as good or bad, attractive, aversive, pleasant, unpleasant, safe or dangerous, and so on. And the metaphor wearing rose-colored glasses also hints at how we understand emotions or affects. So when we literally perceive something as different when we have a particular affective affect projected onto them, it is different than if we didn't have the affect, or if we had a different affect. So literally the way we perceive or evaluate something changes with how we feel about this intentional object. And it is also observed that in decision making, affects have a role. So if we think about different options of what to do in some situation, then we have also an accompanying feeling of this feels right, this doesn't feel right. There is a valence, or there are also different degrees. So yeah, this feels right, but this other thing feels more right, and then I will do that. So we can have different valences directed towards different options, or even the same valence. All the options seem okay, but I feel more strongly about this one particular option, so I will choose that one. So we can see that even in decision making, affects have a role of representing options in different ways, so that we can make a choice based on them, because affects are what helps us evaluate these options differently. And one important thing for the flexibility, which is required for reasoning and cognition, is structure. So it is an assumption that we need structured representations to get flexibility. And here I will show briefly that affective experiences are also structured. So they are not different from the other kinds of mental representations that would be accepted in the traditional view. So the intentional object, as I mentioned, the bear, and the evaluative properties, the bear is dangerous. They are components of this affective experience. And so intentional object in the affective state can play the role of the propositional subject, what the representation is about. It can fill the role of a subject in a sentence, which would be also how propositional representations work. And the properties which are assigned to the intentional object, so dangerous, safe, good, bad, pleasant, unpleasant, they so in we can minimally determine these properties by valence and degree, but there can be, of course, more sophisticated ways to sophisticated properties to attach to the intentional object. They can play the role of the attribute which qualifies the subject. So now from the propositional terminology, and so we can even make this into abstract formula. So we can have the object of representation, which is intentional object in the affective experience, or subject in the propositional terminology. So it can be this object of representation O, and valence and degree, which are attributed to the object, actually valence to the object and then degree to the valence. They can play the role of the attribute. And it can also be written in the form of either where, so it can be either in attributive form, which is the first one of these two in the lower right side of the slide. So we just have a noun-like phrase, or we can have a fully propositional sentence, which is this object O, like for example, the bear is, and then valence is negative, dangerous, and with the degree, for example, very high degree. And that would even make it completely propositional in the way. But I'm staying neutral between these two interpretations because I don't think it matters for now. But I think it only matters to show that that affective experiences have some kind of structure and some kind of compositionality, and this kind of Lego potential, so that they can also participate in flexible thought. So as I said, compositionality is important for flexibility. So representations need to be able to systematically assign the same property to different objects or different properties to the same object. This is what compositionality involves. And so structure of affects also permits this. For example, we can say for different objects that we can have different feelings towards the same object, and we can have same feeling toward different objects, and we can even have affects about affects. So feeling bad about P is good, like or for example, I feel bad about feeling jealous towards this and this person. And so we can have compositional and complex thoughts with affects. And I don't want to claim that affects are as flexible as language-like representations. I think they are definitely not. There are some limitations, but for the purpose of what I'm trying to propose, I just want to say that they have some degree of flexibility and they can participate in some kinds of inferences and reasoning. And this contributes to my further conclusion that there can be other kinds of representations and other kinds of reasoning and thinking, and not just strictly intellectualistic ones. And now I will turn to the case study of emotional bookkeeping. Okay, I think I'm okay on time. So yeah, I will try to now show that there is, as I said, there are three lines of support for this view. The first one was to show this structural and semantic analysis of affective representations, how they, okay, there is a, okay, this is a question. I thought it was a comment on my timing. Yes, I'll return to this later. Yeah, the first line of support was to just provide an analysis of affective representations, how they are similar to both associations and propositional mental representations. And now entering to the second line of support, which would be their explanatory value, that they can be applied to real cases observed in animal behaviors. And one of these, which seems especially convenient because it is already called in the literature emotional bookkeeping, seems to be conveniently explained also that we can apply affective representations to this case. So it concerns reciprocal altruism. And so reciprocal altruism involves all the behaviors where the actors incur immediate costs. So they do something that is costly for them, make some effort, or give up on some time, some free time or something, while the recipient gains immediate benefits. So we can see one example on this picture of two primates grooming each other. So one is the one that is doing the grooming is doing something costly. This is not too costly because it does not require too much effort, and it is not risky for the actor, but it still is somewhat costly, while the recipient gains the benefits of being groomed, from the parasites, and also probably enjoying it. And the actor that is making the effort receives only delayed benefits that depend on the future behavior of the recipient. So the recipient here might decide to give the favor back, but also might not. And if it happens, it will happen with a time delay. This kind of altruism was observed with different behavior, different kinds of favors. So one is grooming, as this one on the picture. There is also sharing food, and also the most risky one, providing support in conflicts with other individuals. And it has also been observed that there are different kinds of favors that can be exchanged. So the one that was groomed would help then the first one if the first one gets in the conflict with other individuals. So it is not only that they exchange the same favor for one another, they can also make exchanges between different kinds of favors. And there are two factors that are important to define reciprocal altruism. One is the time lag. So it cannot be something that is just happening within an hour. So, now I groom you, now you groom me right after that, because then it will be reducible to something like associative expectation that if I groom you, you will groom me immediately after that. So there is an associative connection of gaining the favor right after you give the favor. So then that would not be really altruism. It would be more like expecting of a benefit. And the second factor, which is also important, is the uncertain relation between favors given and received. So it doesn't mean so. Just because someone did the favor doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to receive it back. So there is some kind of uncertainty involved, which is what makes it altruism and not just an exchange of favors. So just and okay, so the results when in a meta study that analyzed many different studies on these kinds of behaviors in primates show that there is a stronger correlation between favors given and received from the same partner over a period of several months than over a short-term period, such as a single day. So just because somebody was nice to you in this day, gave you some favors today, doesn't mean that you will also return the favors in the same day. So it seems to resemble more something like a friendship relationship between the apes than something like a pure exchange of favors. So it seems that the primates were preferably giving favors to partners who were reciprocating favors over longer periods of time, and not necessarily to those who gave them favors recently, which also seems to have some connection with some kind of representing, because it is not something that is purely conditioned by recently received favor, but they seem to represent some longer term relationship between the other individuals. So social preferences in who to give favors to correlated with the partners that were reciprocating favors over longer periods of time, and not necessarily those who gave favors recently. And there seems to be a long-term stability of social preferences. So they showed consistent long-term preference for which partners from their social group they were willing to give favors to, and the short-term effects of receiving favors recently from some other individual were unable to reverse these pre-existing long-term social preferences. So this also seems to indicate that it is not based on some kind of conditioning, simple conditioning mechanism, that they were just expecting to get the favor back. And the researchers claim that these results are best explained by some kind of system that they call emotional bookkeeping, in lack of better words. And they call it, describe it as an emotionally based mechanism that allows to keep track of benefits exchanged over extended time periods. And they say that based on the results of these numerous studies, the primates didn't seem motivated by the expected immediate benefits or reciprocation, so which would indicate simple conditioning, but rather by the good track record based on longer periods, which seems to involve some kind of representation. And so how do affective representations fit this explanation? So first of all, they are formed associatively through received favors in the past, but they are not staying just on this level of elementary association. So there is a time lag between favors given and received, and there is the long-term criteria for social preferences that eliminate the purely conditioning associative explanation, and why this seems like to indicate some kind of representation because of the keeping track of the relevant feature. Usually representations are characterized by something that enables us to keep track of the relevant features of the environment in the absence of immediate perception, which is exactly how this kind of emotional bookkeeping seems to work. And so it really fits the representation part of the affective representation. And also, since it is emotional bookkeeping, it also seems to fit with the affective part. So affective representations as something that keeps track of the track record of the long-term behaviors of each individual in the social group. And this observed behavioral patterns fit better with the integrated affective representation. So not just they don't just depend upon immediately previously received favors, but they are not easily updated on a case-by-case basis, which would be the case if they had if the short-term effects of the favor just received would be able to reverse the pre-existing social preferences, which is not the case. So and also the fact that there was an exchange of different favors, like I said, grooming, sharing food, supporting conflict, indicates that there is a conversion of value into a common currency, which also would fit with an integrated affective representation that keeps track of different kinds of phenomena, which are all subsumed under the one integrated representation or a track record for the particular individual. And compositionality also seems to be satisfied here because there is a tracking of the favor history for each partner in the group, in the social group, and there is this partner-specific memory, the emotional track record. So with all of this, I would say that it seems that affective representations are applied well to explain what happens in this case and how we can actually also explain how the primates are thinking without going either into the abstract propositional kinds of representations required by the traditional views, or without also trying to reduce them to some kind of simple associative mechanisms. And I will turn to the third line of support for this view, which I mentioned previously, the support from neuroscience. So this, as I said, is not conclusive, and I still need to go deeper in this rabbit hole to see if this evidence for this is as firm as it sounds. But I just wanted to hint here that there might be some neuroscientific support for this view, although it will probably take some time to see how much of a support it really is. So there are some claims in recent studies that the affective system, this was only based on humans. So so for now on, I also would need to see how applicable it is to non-human animals. But in humans, it was found that the affective system functions as a flexible, experience-based information processing system, which is capable of tracking relations in the environment, and which is actually also capable of guiding behaviors in a way that is strikingly similar to how rational procedures are understood in philosophy. So rational procedures for decision making. So it seems that that the affective system can perform the roles which were usually assigned to our rational capacities. And also, as I mentioned previously, that there is a common neural substrate between affective and cognitive process. Actually, no, I only mentioned the common substrate between affective and associative processing, but also there are some new studies by Lisa Feldman Barrett that there is a common neural substrate between affective and cognitive processing, that they use the same areas of that same brain areas are activated in both associative and cognitive, that there is not a dedicated cognitive part of the brain and then dedicated affective part of the brain, but they actually use many parts of the brain in the same way. So maybe our conceptual divisions of what is affect and what is cognition were useful for understanding some things, but these are just conceptual differences. But actually, on the level of the brain, they might actually be the same thing. And I'm getting to the end of my presentation. I hope this should be right in time. To summarize, I talked about two problems: the traditional definitions of reasoning, which were intellectualistic and anthropocentric, which conflict with the results of animal reasoning. And I talked about the crisis of the associative and cognitive dichotomy. And then I introduced affective representations as representations which have one leg in both associative and cognitive side of the dichotomy. So they are formed through associative linking, but they are integrated and structured. And I think that this adds a construct, a theoretical construct that is missing from the propositional view, which only allowed for these abstract intellectualistic kinds of representations. And I think that it helps in broadening the concept of reasoning so that it can also include non-linguistic agents, and therefore avoiding problem one. And these representations seem to have these features from both sides of the dichotomy. So they suggest that they give some maybe evidence in, not evidence, but they might help in rejecting the clear-cut dichotomy between associative and cognitive. And because this is a cluster of processes that have a leg in different sides of the dichotomy, so it either worsens or resolves problem two, depending on how you want to see the problem two, because some researchers really still want to keep this dichotomy. So for them, this would be worsening, and for those who want to reject it, this would be resolving the problem, because now we can have even more reasons to reject it. And I also show that these affective representations as a concept are applicable to the phenomenon of emotional bookkeeping, but this is not the only one. So this was just one case study that I had time to show here, but I have previous research where I applied it to transitive inference, where I also tried to show that they're also applicable, and hopefully there will be more to come one by one for different case studies until I introduce this concept into philosophy of mind and cognitive science. So that would be all. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so I'm gonna try and keep a queue organized as usual. I wonder, oh, did we lose you? Oh, you're still here. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you popped off on my screen for a second, I guess, because the mic's picking me up now. Sorry about that. So we do have the comment which you saw the notification for, Sanja. If you wanted to, I could read that to the room, and then maybe you could take that comment, and then as you answer, maybe the queue can develop. So Luke wrote in and said, curious about this bit about affects. The notion that one can have affects about affects is quite interesting. I wonder how deliberate these are, or if there's very little control over how they develop.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a great question. So there are differences in how deliberate actions can be, which are based on affects. And Elizabeth Pacherie actually has a really good paper on this, where she makes this kind of gradual continuum from impulsive actions through semi-deliberate actions to deliberate actions. And yeah, there can be different grades of deliberation. And in this, so impulsive actions would be the ones which are merely led by an affective state, and in which action is performed without any deliberation. And then I think semi-deliberate ones might be the ones which are the most interesting case, where there is some kind of use of affects, but not in the immediate, not immediately, but where we actually have to wait for the appropriate situation to arise so that we can perform something that our affects are instructing us to do, which kind of action we want to perform based on our how we feel. But also the completely deliberate ones are a very interesting case, where we can sometimes even use our emotions to, like, for example, what was her example, that if we want to be on a diet, and we know that we will want to get some food, some hot dogs from some particular street, and then because we know how we feel about it, then we will intentionally take a different route, so that we are aware of how we will feel in a particular time, and then we use this knowledge to make different kinds of decisions. And there was also one other, yeah, for example, when people announce publicly that they want to make some change, like they want to keep exercising, or they are going to quit smoking, I think was the example. And then they know that they will feel embarrassed if they start smoking again, because they announced it and everyone will know. And so they use their own potential future feeling of embarrassment to prevent themselves, to kind of keep them in check, to not do to not smoke now, because yeah, they want to avoid it. So in these, so this is for humans. And then when applied to the animal case, I'm not sure how exactly we could measure it, because usually in humans we do it by introspection. So I'm not sure we have this kind of approach for animals, but there seems to be some kind of deliberation in some cases, when especially in these altruistic cases, where they often either share food, or they have coordinate actions to achieve a common goal, or so I wouldn't say that animals are devoid of deliberation, as is often considered, but I'm not sure how much evidence I can provide for that particular view. So yeah, I don't know if this answers the question. I hope I answered it, but yeah, I'm willing to give more details if needed.
Okay, I'm going to move us along to the room this time. We have Victoria next, if you'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, thank you very much. The very dense presentation. So I think what you want is a general theory that applies to both humans and non-humans. And it's based on this affective representation, or essentially emotionality. So what one issue is that, well, different kinds of animals have different degrees of emotion. We know very little about some emotion in certain kinds of animals. We know a lot more about it in higher mammals, for example. So I wonder if it would help your project if you distinguished between what kind of animals your theory might be more applicable to. Yeah, just a suggestion.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that is a good point. So I always think it's better to have more detailed information about particular species, and then because you're correct. If I'm very against this kind of broad notion that all animals work like this, or we all work in a particular way. I think that there are differences, and these differences should be taken into account. There is also difference in perception. We are mostly visual creatures, and many animals don't rely on vision, and they rely on other senses. So in combination with this, and also with different kinds of emotional, affective processes, there would be differences. So for now, this is just a preliminary way of how we can imagine a different kind of thinking and reasoning, which I think I would be inclined to say that most living creatures feel pleasantness or unpleasantness, and this is what guides them to get food, to reproduce, and to avoid danger, to avoid being hurt. So I would say that they have some level, and then the further research would, it would be more fruitful. It went further into acknowledging the differences between different species. So yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for the suggestion.
Okay, I'll go back in an alternating fashion here to the Zoom and then back to the room here. So we have Christos, who writes, I wonder what you think of suggestions about learning by association in plants rather than animals, or about communication, learning, and memory among trees.
Thanks. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I read about habituation in plants, about this plant that was dropped repeatedly. And in the first instance, the plant was contracting its leaves. This was a plant in a pot, so that's why they were able to drop it. And then in first instances, the plant was contracting the leaves when it falls, but then after a number of times it stopped. So then this was taken by the researchers as meaning that the plant habituated to being dropped, and sort of so in an anthropomorphized terminology, realized that there is no danger in being dropped, so it stopped contracting the leaves. But in any case, it was taken by the researchers of this article to indicate some kind of cognition in plants, and this caused an outrage at the conference where it was presented. But then later, other researchers came forward with this. I don't know anything about trees. I'm not familiar with that kind of literature, but the only thing that I know so far is that these kinds of research question what actually we mean by cognition. So if it is learning by association or learning by habituation, I think there is, I don't have any kind of opinion, but I think it raises an interesting question of what actually do we mean by cognition. So if we also say that plants have cognition too, is it the same? Is it cognition in the same sense in which we talk about animals and humans, or is it a different, is it broadening the concept so much that it is now something very different? I'm not sure, but yeah, it is an interesting area of research, I would say. Yeah.
So we'll go to Nevia next, and then I'm keeping track of some other hands as well. But Nevia, if you could, your microphone's off. Yeah. Just have to hit the similar song.
Thank you, Sanja. That was a very interesting talk. The topic, what attracts me about your work is I seem to see an attempt to shorten the distance between affection and cognition. which is a kind, these two aspects are like seen very widely in a dichotomic way, and they are contrasted to each other. And I kind of seem to see that there is an attempt to shorten the distance, which I think is very good, goal. And I like that kind of goal. But I do have one more worry with, so maybe if we shorten the distance between affection and cognition, then we need to revise our views on rationality. We need to revise the definition of rationality. You presented this like general definition of rationality as based on flexibility. And I think you mean here by flexibility, the revision in accordance to evidence, right? A flexibility that allows our belief revisions on the basis of evidence. Now, I do think that if we shorten the distance between cognition and affection, we need to revise this idea about reasoning and rationality, because in fact, affection seems to be what prevents subjects from revising their beliefs in accordance to evidence. So this is the point that I find the most problematic. And also, I would be interested to know if you know of studies that have found that suggest a common neural substrate between affective and cognitive processes. Because from what I read, actually, even in this case, there seems to be very little sharing, at least from the studies that I am familiar with. Yes, so these are the 2 points that I would like to hear about.
Yeah, thank you. Can you just repeat the part about affects and subject revising? I just didn't hear that part.
It looks
so
like so you presented an idea. You presented reasoning, rational reasoning, as flexible. Like this would be like very crucial feature for reasoning. And a flexibility, I think you intend flexibility in the sense of capacity for revision of our beliefs on the basis of evidence. But my worry is that affective states such as intense desires or intense fears are the obstacles for this revisioning process. So are what makes our reasoning less flexible. So I don't know how you can reconcile these two aspects. So on the one side, very wisely, in my view, trying to shorten the distance between affection and cognition, trying to get rid of this dichotomical way of looking at these two aspects. But on the other side, also keeping this idea of a rational reasoning as flexible in this sense.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good points. So just to note that rational, I actually was defining cognition and reasoning through flexibility and not rationality, but you have a point that it should be.
I think it's a common sharing. It would be also definition of a rational reasoning. But yes, you were talking about reasoning. Yes.
Yes, yeah, but definitely it would be included also in rationality, because we are rational if we revise our views in light of evidence. So there is some literature on reason responsiveness of emotions. So they also, I mean, this is also a human-based literature. So that is a different case from the one that I'm talking about here. But still, that when given reasons, we also tend to revise our emotions. So there is some kind of there are debates about revising or actually about feeling differently when we are given different reasons, when we receive new information about particular situation. So that would be maybe one way to reconcile this how emotions could fit with rationality. But also there are so as for the neuroscientific literature you asked for, it is Lisa Feldman Barrett. I can also link it. I have these papers, so I can also link them in the chat later for yeah to there are the one is I think very new and the other one is a bit older, but yeah, she claims that they are, I'm not sure how much support these neuroscientific studies really give, because just because they are sharing the same neural space, it can indicate somewhat that there is something shared, but still it doesn't have to necessarily mean that they are the same. So yeah, I'm not sure how supportive the support is, but maybe let's say it's some kind of interesting piece of evidence which might be support. And yeah, as to yeah, also one thing I actually didn't say in the presentation, but it is part of my view, is that actually sometimes affects, so rationality I don't take merely as instrumental, but also with something that involves the settings of goals. So I think that affects and emotions can often be our compass for making more rational decisions. And this is not actually just my view. This is also there are Patricia Greenspan and Damasio's also view are also making a bridge between. So they are also shortening the distances you said, like between rationality and emotion. So they are. This is also has been questioned. So I don't want to claim originality in this aspect, that it was already questioned that this kind of dichotomy that emotions are irrational or irrational, and then rationality is just something completely different, that they're just in clash or the opposites. But actually, very often that our emotions are actually which something that helps us be rational, because they provide us information from our environment about something that we feel is threatening or we feel is pleasant, and or something. So they provide additional information from the environment, which is also something that it's also mentioned in these neuroscientific papers, but on a different level of analysis, more like neurological. But yeah, so those are the couple of ways how I would like to reconcile this. But also, I don't want to claim that emotions are always rational, or that they are the I don't know, some special way. I think that they can be used in rational ways, and that they can be helpful, which I think was not considered in cognitive science in these animal research studies. So I don't want to make a bigger claim that they would always. There are also like recalcitrant emotions, and those are the ones that stay even after we have been. So if we have been given reasons that there is, for example, phobias or keeping to some emotions where we rationally know that there is no reason to feel a particular way about something, but even though we know everything, we have all the correct beliefs about the situation, we still feel a particular way. Those are called recalcitrant emotions, and they are not changeable. So they would be an example of irrational emotions, which tend to stay firm even with all the other evidence, completely inflexible. So yeah, there are different aspects of flexibility about emotions. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
If you can pass me to Sanja.
Yeah, I think it's you're not.
Yeah, I'm not gross.
I will bring this to you.
I'm very, very impressed of this presentation. I want to check my understanding. So if I understand you correctly, that you have two directions of ambition. First, in the philosophical side, you want to formalize affect. So you intend to, in the future, that if we have certain effect towards some object and certain other effect towards other subject, then we can use some kind of a formalizable system to infer what kind of composite effect that the subject is going to have through some formalized calculation, which is very cool, very cool. On the other side, I can see the experimental value of your theory that we don't have to cherry pick, already existing experiments. We can do experiments according to your theory. Say, for example, if a subject has a default effect towards certain stimuli compared to a neutral stimuli, then according to your affective bookkeeping theory, the result is going to be different. So we can conduct these experiments on our own to test this theory. Also on the empirical side, I see that empirical value as well. So I do not know if I understand you correctly.
I just wasn't sure. I didn't hear well the last part. So could you please just repeat the main question? So there is a
So, I
formalizable.
understand that your project has two ambitions. On the philosophical side, you want to formalize effect. So maybe in the future, a subject has certain effect to a object and a certain other effect to the other object. Then through some formal calculations, we can infer logically that how this subject is going to feel about a composite of A and a B object through our theory. So I already see that you have, if a subject has certain effect towards an object, and that the subject also certain feelings about the feeling, then you can have the composite feelings for that. And maybe there's the math level, and maybe there's some additional level, maybe some way to formalize effect altogether. And on the other side, I feel like your theory has a lot of empirical value as well, so we can design experiments. Say, for example, the subject has certain default effect towards an object versus a neutral effect to other objects. If you use those different objects as stimuli, then it will yield different results. One support of the associationist view, one in support of your affective bookkeeping view, and that can be empirically tested. And I'm very, very excited if that's what you're actually heading towards.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be the very farther parts of the project. So for now, I mean, yes, I would like. I'm not sure how far I could go with formalizing affect, how that could be done. But for associations, there already are many models that work with different degrees of positive and negative association, and then they make different predictions about the behaviors of the subjects. And I think that empirically applying these affective representations would work very similarly to these associative models because they are based on associations. They are just more complex. And I would say that actually these new generation associative models have already done this work of empirically developing theoretical models, which are aiming to explain the behaviors of animals in very different parts of the experiment. So this is in my previous paper on transitive inference, where they have this case study with emotional bookkeeping was a field study. So the primates were observed in their natural habitats and how they behave anyway. But the previous study on transitive inference was done in the laboratory. So they have the training phase where they learn how to do the task, and then they have the testing phase. And then these associative models with very detailed numerical predictions were predicting exactly in which phase of the training study. So first session, second session, third session. So they were making very detailed prognosis about the behaviors and which choices they would make in which phase of the study. So in a way, because my affective representations are supposed to be similar to associations, just more complex, with more complex information stored, they would actually function pretty similarly to associations. And then in regards, if I keep them only to positive, negative, and to the intensity. If I want to develop it more in terms of, I mean, there are different kinds of positive emotions, there are different kinds of negative emotions. So we can feel fear, sadness, anger, and so on. They are all negative, and they can all be at the same degree. So there is a different kind of quality. I'm not sure how that could be formalized, or that would be a further challenge. But yeah, so to answer your question more directly, as for the empirical part, the empirical goal, there has already been done much work, and I would maybe be more just taking along that train and just adding a bit more to something that already exists. And then as to the formalization part, yeah, that would be some later stage of the project. But for now, I'm just trying to conceptualize and to just introduce this term into science, and yeah, to see if it gets accepted, and then take it from there. Yeah, but thank you.
Another question? Two questions, is that okay?
Is it a brief follow-up?
No, separate.
If it's two separate, then I might.
Okay,
Get in contact with after it's back up. If there is somebody who would be willing to cap things off with a brief question, we could entertain that over the last few minutes. So I think I saw your hand before, Sanja.
Thank you for your lecture, and I think about my question is about could affects themselves as representations. And you know, it's different between the feeling of now I feel so good and the memory of I feel so good. And I think what's installed in the neural system is the recording of effects, not the effect themselves. So I think maybe there's a carrier of affective information as the mediation mechanism or something like that. That's my question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear well the question. I apologize for asking everyone to repeat, but yeah, I'm just not hearing it.
My question is about I think we need what's restored in the neural system is the recording of effects, not the effect themselves. You know, it's different with I feel so good and the memory of I feel so good. So there's something as a carrier of affective information, not just effects. For human, we use language as this carrier of information. But for animal, it might be also animals language like simple, like dog can bark happily or bark sadly. It can carry the information of facts. But I think the effects could not be the representations. This is my question.
So yeah, if I understood you correctly, so what you want to say is that what's stored in the neural system is information that is provided by the affects and not the affects themselves. And then and in humans, we can have this kind of information stored in a propositional way, but then how would it work for animals? The same. Okay. Well, that's, yeah, I haven't thought about this from this angle. So, yeah, I mean, it is a part of my theory that affects carry information, that they actually provide us information about our environment and what is good for us, what is bad for us, what we should chase, what we should avoid, and so on. So I would say that this information doesn't need to have, so the key point of the theory was that this information, which in philosophy of mind and epistemology was always conceived as something that as like some kind of linguistic form, actually this information doesn't need to have linguistic form. It can have a different form, and this form can also be taken by affects, which in themselves have this kind of structure. So as I showed, so there is an object and there is an evaluation of the object, and that is enough. We don't need language. We don't need to translate it to language to have the information. We can just feel the information through more simple ways. And yeah, so that's how it would be enough for non-linguistic agents to operate on this information. That was the part of the theory, and then I tried to make it more convincing by showing that affects have this structure, and there is no reason why they couldn't store that kind of information that has some kind of composition. And it seems more realistic that animals could have this kind of experiences, that animals are also afraid of other animals, that they can perceive other animal as dangerous. They can be afraid of the other animal without needing to translate it to language or propositional representations. So I'm not sure if I answered your question. Is that what you meant?
I think I think yes.
Okay, thank
That
you.
does bring us to a natural conclusion. So at this time, I think it'd be great if we could all thank our speaker once again, and then those of us who are physically here can continue discussing things downstairs.
Thank you.
So much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, and great questions. And yeah, Ben, thank you for inviting me also.
You are very welcome. Sure, we'll talk again soon.
Okay, yeah.
Recording here.
Okay.